Hey, what's up, viewer? And welcome back. This is Day 6, Hour 4 of this Nebulous live creation series. And I'm glad that you're here taking the time to take a look at this. The game is still coming along nicely. I've got a lot more work to do, but I am slowly but surely managing to get some things set up for the game. I've still got some design decisions to make and all kinds of other stuff, to be honest with you, but I am making progress. And as long as I get started, I do manage to get something done on these streams. So, as I said before, it does help that I'm doing these recordings for whatever reason. Helps me focusing. Helps me with focusing on the problem at hand. It's easy for me to lose focus if I don't do that, and then I was trying to do a recording with no microphone, and I was losing focus very strangely then also. Talking through it seems to help me out. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that here on YouTube. Plus this game is like a little complicated, so it is a pretty solid recreation of it's a pretty solid creation of an original game. It's not just a recreation of other games. So there is nuance of creating a completely original game from the ground up in the series. As long as you're able to stick with me and not fall asleep while you're listening, which I wouldn't blame if every once in a while I make you fall asleep on these. Every once in a blue moon. It's not very interesting, but that's kind of the nature of it. It's not super interesting over here for me either, but it's part of what you've got to do to get this done. So just understand that I also have to drudge through this. That's a big part of what it's like to make these games sometimes, is feeling those things and pushing through them anyways. So alright, so with all that said, I think I'm just gonna get started here. If I entered play mode, okay, so the issue I'm at right now is that I have an issue with this designing the maximum scan frequency, because the maximum scan frequency is scalable through, if it's scalable through the infrastructure, then it only takes like 9 points to quote-unquote max it out. Whereas if you add 9 points to scan range, that doesn't add much in comparison to being able to essentially max out scanning. So the only balance that comes into play would be the frequency of the scan exponentially increasing the cost. So if they rush up a couple tiers, they won't be able to afford them unless they're very, very small scans or something like that. And so now the question is coming in: how to balance investing in scanning frequency. The idea of having the tiers go to 8 still makes a lot of sense, because or going to 9, whichever one it is. But how do I increase? Okay, so my idea basically is to just shift the decimal places a little bit and essentially maybe make the starting value 1 to maybe like 1.1, and then every scanning frequency buff increases that 0.1 to like 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, but then that only increases it to 100 values or whatever. So you're really looking at like needing, it's just never going to compete with the range is the thing. So I am a little stumped on this design-wise. I'm a little stumped on how to balance out this scanning frequency on the planet. it can't just scale up of its own accord like the other stats, because I've got it hodgepodged into this color system for scanning. So the other thing I can imagine is spreading the frequency, the potential frequency range from 10 to like 10,000. But that essentially creates signatures with that much variance. So I'm not sure if that's necessary or not. The other thing I could do is just make scan frequency cost more to level up. In which case it defeats a lot of other mechanics in the game that are revolved around not using exponential curves to that degree. So the only way to make a scan frequency with an exponential frequency increase would be, more or less, I would have to leave the visible color spectrum after level 7 or 8 or whatever. And it would have to be a more instantaneous frequency. Which means I might have to increase the speed between frequencies pretty hard. And then effectively push beyond the levels 8 or 9 frequency with the... it's just that if you invest in the frequency value, you can unlock huge, like, caches of value by literally just spending like 5 points of economy, and that just doesn't seem correct. So the only thing I can really imagine would be to have an open scanning frequency cap. And I would have to change the range. Or, yeah, I'd have to change the range of the color gaps, basically. And I could give 10,000 upgrade points the color spectrum or something, and then the only issue there is it starts to increase. I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm just kind of hung up on this as a design decision because scanning frequency is important for gathering more in-depth information about a signature and for sending out a scan faster. So being able to increase the scan frequency makes some sense. However, it is breaking down for me as to how to fix this particular issue. Because if I assumed a colorless band, you could just increase the speed of the scan by the frequency value. You would also need higher frequencies to potentially push through nebulonic barriers. So perhaps there would be a reason to have higher frequencies, but I'm not sure. I like the balance where it's at on the color spectrum. So it's almost like this one would have to max out. at least for now. And if I max out at like 8 or 9, it'll be really cheap. To get the infrastructure, but it's very expensive to get the scan out of it, is like kind of where the balance comes into play. So eventually the players will kind of understand that scanning frequency is like not necessarily super important early, because it gets like very expensive even though it doesn't scale up that hard, or even though the scaling up of it is not very high, like the cap is low. That is essentially the best idea I've got at the moment, because otherwise there would have to be some kind of really janky like system where the float scales, or it increases, it iterates by like 1,000th of 1 or something. So effectively you can go from 1 to 9 in like 8,000 investments. Well, then like it's so fine-tuned that it's like that starts to pack a lot more potential area into the game space, because you can fine-tune to those frequencies. So the idea is to have a range that is much smaller for potential random celestials in the solar systems. And if that potential difference in scanning capacities is like 10, then you could have 10 separate tiers. But if I do the thing where it goes to like 1,000 per integer, then you're getting into like thousands of tiers, and it's not going to feel correct, I don't think. Alright, so I'm rather sure scan range doesn't work correctly. Let me just double check here. Okay, it's not working correctly, so real quick I'm going to clean up a little bit of this. The system is still there, but I have this balancing concern for how to make it not feel too redundant, because you barely have to invest in it, and then it leaves the potential on the table to scan stuff that you need to. So I'm a little fishy on that part, to be honest. Alright, so if I need to go in here and double check something. These buttons, for some reason, do not have there's something not correctly set amongst these buttons. And all it's changed is they're carbon copies, basically. So that leads me to believe that it would be a parent element. Let's see here. Up and down. Centered. Justify. So let me double check then. These are flexing to 1. Let me see if I change them to 0, if that helps. And more specifically, I'm trying to clean up the buttons in the game mode here. And they're still janky. So let's keep checking. We've got, so that's all basically fixed here. The alignments are all the same. The sizes are all the same. Margins and paddings are all the same. Text values are all the same. Background color is all the same. So It's gotta be button specific. Or perhaps this element here. Okay, so 1 0 1 0. These alignments are the same, I mean. And they're all sized automatically. So I'm really not sure why it is not aligning these properly. It's acting, it almost is acting like I'm running them like this, but it's not correct. So let me see what happens if I swap them around here. I'm really not sure. It's like these elements should technically be working. They're basically carbon copies here. Let me maximize it and see if I can get a better look at it. Alright, so it just looks like it almost looks like maybe the text element has a margin that's incorrect, actually. So let's see here if this has a margin, has 1% padding. They all have a 1% padding. And no margin. %1 margin, no padding. Same things. The buttons don't have a margin padding. They're the same in here anyway. Zero, 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 zero. So there's 1%. Yeah, I'm just not sure. What if I set this to 1% again? Oh, and I messed up the gapping. But it was already acting like that in the first place. And I'm not finding any... It's all aligned on the, as far as the UI builder is concerned. It's still weird in here though, for some reason. And I'm just not sure why that is. I'm finding it very curious. For some reason, the value is, or the text is perhaps doing something funny. And these texts are the same also. So then it's looking like this is the culprit, but it's all at 1%. So it should be equal. This doesn't have anything different there. They don't have any flex grow. Alright, so I don't know why this is doing this, to be completely honest. It's like I need to yank the percentage in the padding of the value. So we go here and check on its padding. The top just needs to be 0. I don't know how else to describe this part. And it's not how this works. I don't know why it's separate, but because these have the same values. Or wait a minute, hold on, let me click on this. The top is at, yeah, that's a 1. But these are also in pixel, not percentage. But let's see if it works or not. Okay, they're still jacked. Alright, so I can't remember how I fixed these two then. Sure, I just can't remember. Because all the settings look exactly the same here. I mean, I've looked at everything, it's all matched. These are all basically the same thing. These are all the same thing except for that number I changed. So since it's not matching, the only thing I can imagine is changing the height value. Since I removed this, let me change this to, oh, it's not letting me. Guess it doesn't matter. Yeah, honestly, I don't know why this isn't working. It's correct in here, but then when I go to the game view, it's just fucked up for some reason. And I can see why there's extra space getting put into these two. So maybe there's like an extra element artifact or something I left in there. Let me double check what's going on. Okay, so from here, it's just label and then active selection. If I'm here, it's just label active selection inside of the selection scan frequency. And then there's these buttons, and then if I'm looking at this one, it has active selection economy value. Or wait a minute. Economy element title and then active selection economy value. with an active selection economy element. So the only difference is this is named. So let me see if that for some reason works. So those weren't named. Maybe they were throwing off the system for some reason. They still look messed up. But the configuration is the same. As far as I can tell anyways, it's the same. So let me open this back up and I have to keep diving in here, I suppose. And we've already basically compared all of this stuff. So we're just considering this first row. All of that is set correctly. All of these are set. Looks like they're basically set the same. So here the height has been updated before, but it's back to auto. So these are just all auto heights. The margins and paddings are the same as well. So all of the values are the same. If I start diving into their individual elements, now we're looking at the titles. And this title has a shrink of 1. This one has a shrink of 0, so let's shrink this. And let's shrink this one. And this title is using text wrap. These are using, or excuse me, this one is, I guess, a little weird. So over here it says it's using no wrap, but it's actually set to wrap. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So let's see if this breaks. Let's see if this breaks the other one. Alright, so now they're fixed. Perfect. So I guess that was the text element was not configured correctly. The shrink value was actually set to 0, so it wasn't giving up extra space. Alright, so now I want the scanning values to be added into the scanning array. So let me see if it already does that to some degree. I don't think I've hooked up the code to update the scanning capacity. Alright, so it's not doing anything, so I'd have to consider that. And part of that is going to be inside of the spawn celestial, because I have to add the scanning range infrastructure. It actually is on there already. So we're looking at never actually used this. If we're iterating the economy, then we want to are we gonna have to check for scanning radius also, and to see if I'm basically seeing just repeating this to some extent. So we will say if the previous economy infrastructure, except for its previous scanning range, is not equal to the active selection scanning range, then we have to go through and update stuff. Which means player data will need comparable value of active selection, previous scanning range, infrastructure. Okay. So we'll effectively do the same thing here. Player data dot active selection previous scanning range infrastructure is not equal to active selection I have to add it here. Active selection scanning range infrastructure value. So AS, SRIV, if they're not equal, this is assuming it has one invested in the first place. And if these values are not equal, then they need to become equal. They need to I might need to grab two separate labels in this instance. I actually have to grab the active selection scanning range value. And for consistency, I'll put it down here. That label is going to have its label text set to the active selection scanning range infrastructure value dot to string. And the slider, which is the active scanning range value, or active scanning range slider. I have to query for that. I have to double check what it's called. It is called the active scanning radius, is actually all it's called. Okay. Oh, but actually well, yeah. Okay, so a few things have to change here. We have to take the, and I'm going to change the name of this, match the string. Oh, I did this backwards. This is active scanning range. Maybe we'll just name it that. So now we have active scanning range dot max value I guess it's high value equals I should stipulate it's max scanning range, but I guess it doesn't matter from this point. So am I just adding the it's just this. Okay, so I was trying to remember if changing this value has a callback or not. So I'm going to save this one and run what I've got and see how it goes. And this should update the scanning range in both capacities through the investment UI output and through the active scanner maximum. So let's take a look. I might have forgotten one thing, which was to set the actual text output. So if I select this, it's 5 and 3. And if I start to invest in the scanning range, is it investing or not? It doesn't look to be starting the investment properly, so let me check the component. It doesn't have an output, so I guess it doesn't matter. We're going to have to double check that the component is getting added to the iteration process. Which may be in the raycast code. Now we've got the scanning infrastructure already set up here. Alright, so on the new active selection, it should in fact provide the ability to... Okay, so I suppose what's missing here is... This is incorrect. So if I add scanning range, or if I invest in scanning range, I need to add this as a scanning range infrastructure, and I have to queue up the new one utilizing the new addition, and I need to disable the additional ability. And then it's basically the same thing here for removing it. Let's make sure we change the component type here. And now we've got the scanning range should update its values, and give us a higher scanning range through our investment. So let's see if this works. Okay, so that's a little weird. It turned off the wrong button, but it is now increasing the scan range. If I clear the investment, okay, so this is a little broken. Oh, and I understand why that's broken. But if I come down here and I start to drink up the scan range, it has not updated on the element correctly. And this is getting upset because I okay, so it was probably noticing it was different, and then it was trying to query for the I'm actually not sure exactly which one it was complaining about. Let me see here again. So let me see. Object reference not such an instance of an object. However, here it should be set actually. So that would lead me to believe that maybe this is incorrect. Active scanning range. I'm pretty sure I already checked if that's correct or not. Oh, it says it's radius. My bad, my bad. So in fact, it's just the fact that I did not stick to convention in naming. Okay, so let me fix that, and now let me double check if the investment... Oh, and I might as well fix that other button issue while I'm here, which was that these need to be switched with scanning range clear. Or wait a minute. Yeah, scanning range. Oh no, it says I should do scanning range invest. Yeah, because we're changing the investability. Alright, so let's give this another shot. It may now accurately get to the code where it can update the scanner value. So let's select the planet. If we invest, it turns off the proper button. However, I did not set the deficit correctly. Keep that in mind. And it is not live updating this value here, but if I leave the planet and come back, it is updating it. And it can go up to 15. So we're still missing so we've got two things missing. One of them is updating this button live, and to do that, I need to jump into the UI builder and click on the button and double check what the name of the element is, and it's if I click on it here, it's active scanning radius max. So I need to go back into this code and I have to basically grab a label and it's called active scanning radius max, and this label actually needs to get its text value set equal to active scanning range dot height value. Should work. So this will be fixed. Oh, and it's a text, so I have to put it to a string anyway. Okay, so what was the other concern? The other concern was that adding it didn't actually decrease the deficit properly. Which is basically a good point. So if it gets added to this list, basically, player data dot total economy gain per tick needs to go down by 1. And if it's cleared, it needs to go up by 1. The economy found an extra tick by removing this, and it loses a value by the investment. So I need to come down here and do the same thing in both of these. Clearing it adds the value, and then this one goes like this. And that should actually fix the tick value, and it should fix the counting it whenever it's investing. I'll save the UI builder, whoops. Alright, save the UI builder and somehow I screwed that up when I was accidentally clicking it and stuff. I'll have to fix that. But for testing's sake, if I come in here and grab this, and I click on scan range invest, it didn't go down to 4 properly. It took a split second, and then this is going up. If I clear it out, it just go up to 5. And I have 15 scan range. Okay. And I can't afford the scan, it's too big. Oh wait, but now I can. That is effectively how that works. And then from here, it would be cool to give the player an auto lock feature that will automatically do the most efficient scan. Something like this. And like bring the angle way down, more than I can get here on the screen like this, and essentially bump up the frequency. And do do a better scan of this planet, basically, or something like that. Okay, so yeah, so I have this set up and I have this set up, and I have to, let me go back and fix this little thing here. I'm not sure how I messed that up, so let me see if I can figure it out. It might have accidentally set itself to absolute or something, because I was dragging it. So let me take a look. Whoops, I accidentally double tapped that, so let me open up the UI builder and take another look at this and see what I messed up here. So position is relative. Size is automatic. It's also set to automatic, so I'm not sure. I know I like accidentally grabbed it like this, but nothing else has actually changed on it. I mean, everything else is the same. So that is disappointing to see. I'm not sure how I screwed that up. Let me try, like, yanking it out of the element or something. Let me see if that will fix the layout. Alright, so no, it did not. So it's almost like the scanner is getting a little testy or something. I don't remember changing any of its settings, so let me see. I did go up to pixel width on accident. That must be what it is. Alright, very good. Okay, so now there's like, I guess for technicality's sake we can buff the frequency, but it's going to have some special cases where it's not supposed to be making the frequency go any higher. So I'm going to have to deal with that later as a design decision. However, it does allow for multiple infrastructure bumps to planets, or essentially any celestial that has the capacity to receive the bonuses, which may be any of them. I'm not sure yet. Excuse me. Alright, so we might as well just hook up this one. So for the frequency clear, we're going to remove the frequency. That's still correct, but we have to reassign the queue. We might just be able to, like, we could use it. We could use the current list of options, and then this does in fact increase the. Oh, you know what else? In here, I could probably. Probably what I can do is just like let this frequency go up past 10 pretty far, but just leave it white, and then it can just act as a frequency, as a scan, a super hyper fast scan basically, and that will keep the cute little color thing in play, and also allow for the scanning frequency to increase without limit, similar to the other game stats. I think is what I'm going to do for now. And if I need to get more specific, more complicated later, I can do that. So for now, so this is on clear, which is why it increases, because there's one less thing tanking the economy. And then scanning frequency invest. Set enabled to true, so we can invest in it again, unless okay, so basically here, oh no, I'm setting it up now to not have a cap. Okay, never mind. So yeah, just turn it back on. So now we're doing the same thing on the other side of this. So we've got to reset the queue. To a new queue, which there might be a more efficient way to do that part also. And now that we're investing in the economy, we have to remove the economy's tech per value. And we have to turn off the scanning frequency invest button, so we don't double invest anything. Clear button always stays on, and so now we should effectively be able to invest in all three of these. Oops, I accidentally clicked the wrong button there. Alright, so now if we oh, and I didn't go through the option of increasing the max frequency number. So that could very likely not work properly, but let's just see what we do here. So we click invest, the deficit will go up every turn. So let's start with scan range and scan frequency and see what happens. Alright, so the scan frequency is not going up, although it says it is. So I think I'm just messing. I think I just forgot to do the UI part more than anything. I'll just take a look at that. But I'll save that for the next video since we've reached 1 hour here. So, alright, so this UI stuff all has to come together for the game. It's for the player to control the game, since there's no micromanaging of the ships by clicking or anything. And therefore, all of the Empire control does come through the UI, so the UI has wound up being my priority at the moment. However, with a few more tweaks, it will actually have the systems the game has access to at the moment, which is scanning and economy. You actually will have the ability to, on your starting system, tweak your economy and your scanning capacity. And once that is completely accurate, we basically are going to have to move on to these two, which the research window is very similar to this. It's literally just it's a name with an output value and an investment option. They just happen to affect different things in the game space compared to this, which is very specifically an infrastructure. But basically these two can go hand in hand pretty well. And then after that, it's going to come down to building ships is going to be very important. So I got a lot more work to do for that. But happy you're here checking it out. And if you want to see more, make sure you come check out the next video. So thank you very much. Take care.